On this episode of the Tech Talk, I want to go over three technology items that, when they were released, they started off strong but then fell off into obscurity, or they just fell flat from the very beginning. They're unique technologies that had some potential, but unfortunately, the industry and the technology world is just not ready for them. So let's check them out and let's look into them. So the first product that comes to mind is the idea of modular smartphones. Now, of course, most of us are familiar with the history of smartphones, especially once Apple jumped into the scene with the original iPhone. Since then, we've seen so many innovations and variations of the smartphone idea that have come into play over the years. We've gotten dual screen phones, phones with professional level cameras, and of course, the special category of foldable devices that have been making waves since their release. However, there was one category of smartphones brewing at one point that had people interested, and that's the concept of modular smartphones. Now, the idea of modular smartphones is essentially that you have a base starting smartphone that you purchase, and then when you want to upgrade specific features and functions of that specific smartphone, you only purchase the accessory item that you need to upgrade that specific function. So, for a simple example, you would be able to have a phone that has a 48 megapixel rear camera. But if you wanted to take better photos and have higher quality video, you could theoretically detach that 48 megapixel camera piece off your smartphone and replace it with a 200 megapixel camera piece, instantly upgrading it to a higher quality camera set. But it's interesting because only a few companies really dabbled in the modular phone concept idea, most notably being Google. Unfortunately, the smartphone modular concept never took off for a number of reasons. One of the most important reasons was the cost factor due to the variety of different parts that would need to account for a base set of smart devices. So it made it really difficult to keep the price down. Second, it was almost impossible to get manufacturers to all agree to a specific standard of parts to use across all spectrums of devices. Last but not least, the engineering of these products were extremely time consuming and meticulous, adding to the already high cost factor. In fact, Google actually had a prototype working for a modular device, but ended up canceling the project in 2016 due to these factors, among other things. So perhaps one day the technology will be there for it, but it looks like for right now, there are no plans to see any kind of that technology come through anytime soon. Now, the next item we're going to talk about is the most unique out of all three items listed. It's actually a technology I've never heard of before until research for this episode. It's a type of wireless network technology called Li-Fi. So it was actually developed as an alternative to Wi-Fi network technology. And Li-Fi stands for light fidelity. And it's a type of wireless communication tech that uses light instead of radio waves such as Wi-Fi to transmit data at high speeds. So you could potentially have LED light bulbs as internet connectivity points that you can connect your home devices to the network with. There are actually some pretty significant benefits to this. For example, Li-Fi can achieve much faster speeds than Wi-Fi due to the vast bandwidth of the visible spectrum. Early commercial Li-Fi systems already had seen speeds capable of reaching several gigabits, and in some situations under a testing environment, the ranges have hit 20 gigabits all the way up to potentially and theoretically 200 gigabits of speed. Another key advantage of the system is that because light cannot penetrate through walls, there's a much higher level of security. So anyone with malicious intent wouldn't be able to pull any data from these Li-Fi systems because they'd literally have to be in the room to directly connect and receive the data. However, there are some weaknesses that are pretty significant that have to be taken into consideration. For example, the range is very limited because of the fact that it's literally based on how far the light can reach. And because it can go through walls, you cannot just use one light source to cover an entire building or unit. Another weakness is that since any object can literally block the light source, the unit has to have a direct line of sight to receive the data. And so the receiving device has to be able to be hit by that light in order to be able to properly download and process the data that's being sent to it. So you can't defy the laws of physics. Light doesn't go through an object that blocks it. So unfortunately, that's one area that they have to work to find a resolution for. So while I believe this tech is amazing and has great potential, I can see why it never really took off and has been very limited because of those particular weaknesses. The law of light physics makes it likely that it'll remain relegated to a tech that'll never fully become available to the average user. Last item I want to look at is a little bit more personal for me because I remember when this craze was going on, and that is the technology of 3D televisions. I remember in the early 2010s when 3D televisions were all the rage. Everyone thought that was the next big thing in technology. I would see so many different brands and models that were selling 3D branded televisions that you could use for watching movies, playing video games, and other kinds of tech usages. 3D tech was so popular for a brief period of time that even the video game company Nintendo got in on the action with their Nintendo 3DS system, which is a fully functional 3D handheld gaming device. And later on, when they added updates to it, it would actually support 3D videos in addition to the 3D games. I even remember when the Avatar movie by James Cameron was released, it caused 3D movies to become so popular for a period of time. But as you can see today, there's no 3D TVs being sold anywhere. So what happened? Well, one of the biggest factors was cost. It was very expensive and a high investment to purchase to have a 3D TV along with 3D glasses tech in the home. At home, you had to make sure that the orientation of the TV and your proximity to the TV was configured, or you would see ghosted double images even with the 3D glasses on. The other issue with 3D televisions is that while there were some movies that did come out that were made with 3D in mind, most movie studios would not create movies in 3D due to the much higher cost factor for filming in 3D. So they would take their 2D movies and upgrade them to 3D, but that reduced the effectiveness of 3D due to the fact that they weren't built with that in mind. Finally, on top of all of that, only a select number of movie studios really dabbled in 3D, and as a result, fewer and fewer movies were coming out that were 3D focused. So this led to an eventual decline and fading out of 3D televisions in favor of higher resolution TVs such as 4K televisions. And since then, we haven't seen anything in terms of 3D movies in a long time except what's relegated to the theaters. And that'll likely be that way for the foreseeable future. So these are three tech items that I wanted to go over that either fell flat when they came out or relegated to a niche market that I really enjoyed going over. But what do you guys think? Have you heard of some of these technologies, particularly the Li-Fi? That one was very new to me. I've never heard of that one before. And let me know what you guys think. Leave a comment below of items that you liked and really enjoyed that was a short-lived technology that isn't around today or is very limited right now. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Also, if you guys did like this video, please hit that like button for me and subscribe to my channel because I have more content incoming and excited to share those with you guys. Also, hit that notification bell so that way you'll be notified when new incoming content comes in. Thank you guys so much today for coming to this episode of the Tech Talk. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to the next one. Until then, guys, thank you.